Meeting on the crossroads where the two forbidden subjects of religion and politics intersect. This is the Sophie Scholl Roundtable. And there is something controversial that has been occurring this month. Some say love the controversy. Others would say, not so much. You've been seeing it demonstrated by flags being flown in City Hall, even on some churches, hospitals, the gay pride flag. Now, I think that's a little superficial because I think the issue goes much deeper than that. But before we get into the issue, I've got to introduce my guest today, Sam Bailey. And I appreciate Sam being here. And Sam, so that people can get familiar with you, would you just describe yourself in brief?
I'm a tax accountant by trade. Met Mel and Warren in a spirituality discussion group. I was kind of on one end of the spectrum from some of the others. I am atheist, if you will, but I'm open to all ideas, and I love to hear other people's opinions. And and I have a 26-year-old son.
And you know what? I can vouch for it because Sam listens. When I've been in this group with him, he has a listening ear as to what people have to say. Even if the topic isn't agreed upon, there's this level of civility that is expressed. And I know there's this whole discussion with gay pride and that phenomenon being much more prominent and prevalent in our society today. Sam, in brief, what are your thoughts in response to what you are seeing and observing?
Well, my understanding of the Pride Month is that it's to emphasize how much the LGBTQ community have moved forward from days of heavy discrimination, marginalization. So it's to acknowledge compliments and how much more they feel that they need to go still. Problems they have with society, and other people still. My understanding is, and I certainly agree with it, that many people think it's a choice. I do not. I think if you get to know LGBTQ people, they will almost uniformly say that at some point in their life, often young, they just realized something was different. And I acknowledge that maybe some older people decide to experiment one way or the other, but I think somebody that has that feelings, for a long time, I certainly accept that as natural. And I think it is natural. It may not be the norm, but homosexuality is seen in, I looked this up last night, 1,500 species, and virtually all of the primate species. One of the chimpanzee species is actually almost exclusively bisexual, which I found interesting. But so I'm very accepting, supporting. I don't like that anybody, be it race, religion, color, sexual orientation, is marginalized. So I would support anything that decreases that situation.
And how would you view the marginalization as to the way in which it occurs?
Well, some of it would be like employment discrimination, housing discrimination. A big topic right now is adoption issues, more so with church-based adoption groups, and what their rights are from their perspective. It was, my understanding is there was quite a large riot back in 1969, I think, that this whole Gay Pride Month is based on. And at that time, the police were still raiding get-togethers of that kind of sort. And I guess that's some of the ways it's manifested.
Yeah. As we've been observing this debate or this phenomena in our culture, I've really been stepping back and listening to Dr. Everett Piper talk about this subject of ontology, that is, the science of being, the metaphysics of nature. And I really get back underneath it to the point of, is the term homosexual and gay merely a social construct?
I don't. Well,
yeah.
Do you believe that?
I do.
Okay.
I really do. Yeah.
Okay. I don't believe that. I believe it's just a label that we put on a characteristic, if you will, just like big ears and short legs. I don't. Obviously, from my point of view, it's not a behavioral choice, which would be more of a social construct. I think it's a natural, since it is a naturally occurring item.
And see, I think not only is homosexual a social construct, but also the term heterosexual is a social construct. And the reason why I'm saying this
Please explain.
is when you go back to 1828, Webster's Dictionary,
Okay.
that original work which defined terms here in America, our English language. And in that dictionary, you will not see the word homosexual or heterosexual. It's not there, it's not defined. So it is a term, as I understand, that arose in the 1860s to move the debate from behavior, choice, action, to a level where this involves ontology, identity, personhood. And as Everett Piper was sharing this, he said, this is a seismic shift because you move from behavior, inclinations, feelings, and identify those as having nature themselves, an identity, personhood. And I said, yeah, that really makes sense. Or think about it this way. Isn't the word bisexual, transsexual, and all these different ways in which we're expressing sexuality now something similar that has taken place? We're given these terms ontological status rather than behavioral status.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. I think, as we learn more about these characteristics, it does become part of somebody's individual identity. Not that it wasn't always, but society in general, really, to some extent today, but certainly up to 50 years ago, did think of it as a behavioral choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with behaviors, you don't give behaviors rights, you don't give behaviors freedoms, but if you can couch the debate in terms of personhood, identity, then it's easier to leverage rights, freedoms, since they have the status of personhood.
Sure. And it's similarly to I guess race isn't really a choice, but as we recognize that one race is equal to another race, that creates a situation where rights are involved.
It's interesting, like with race, see, I would say there's just one race, the human race.
I would agree with you.
All right! That's great. And I thought if we get back to that idea of one human race, that would help to ease, I think, the problems of racial politics we're seeing in society today.
I agree. The question is how to do that, because so many people, whether it's race, sexuality, even socioeconomic status, some people, obviously not all, but some people have this idea if there's some different characteristic to themselves, there's something fundamentally different, and that often turns into a I'm better than that situation.
See, I always think too, and I've been thinking a lot about this subject. I just wish we all could understand in this whole debate about sexuality that we're all Homo sapiens.
Oh, we definitely are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
it's a
just
species.
Let's just identify us, whether you're atheist, theist, whether you are a person that has same-sex inclinations, or you're a person who has attractions to the opposite sex. Homo sapien. Just start there rather than heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, transsexual. I think that would
be a wonderful world. And it brings me to all you science fiction fans, the world of Star Trek. I just think, watching those shows as a young person and through the years, it was ahead of its time in focusing on equality between all kinds of various people and characteristics. That would be, if we could get to that point, that would be wonderful. But somehow you've got to get over this idea that different Homo sapiens have different worth.
Such as?
Just from a different point of view. For instance, obviously a white supremacist would feel superior to a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
That type of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe, we certainly know that some heterosexuals feel that homosexuality or LGBTQ people are some kind of an abomination. And some of that's related to their own thoughts, and some of it's related to their religious upbringing. I think, there's no one reason.
Right. But then also think about this whole thing of homosexual, heterosexual. What makes heterosexual so unique and distinct, especially when there are heterosexual attractions that to me are very sinful and so contrary to the Word of God? That is, you can look upon a woman in a lustful way. Well, that's a heterosexual attraction, so do I really want to be identified as a heterosexual? When we think about our desires heterosexually, from my perspective, there's only one way in which those can be fully demonstrated in a holy way, and that's through one man for one woman in the bond of marriage.
Sure, that's the religious side of...
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should... Not every religious side, I guess at the very least, a Christianity side of view.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm having misgivings in a culture that uses this terminology, heterosexual, homosexuality, giving those two terms ontological status.
We're so big on labels. We're so big on labels that we need some way to describe different characteristics. So I think that those terms have morphed into ontological.
Yes, I agree with you. They've morphed into gaining status of being.
And I think, although I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, I think as any culture goes through time, they change their meanings of words and understandings. And what could be ontological to us may not be to a tribe in South Africa.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do a cross-cultural study on that.
Very interesting, yeah.
Yeah. But I think for us, especially here in this nation, when we have like the Declaration of Independence that talks about the laws of nature and nature's God, I think that gives definition, or it gives parameters, guidelines as to how to deal with the aspects of sexuality, personhood, ontology that are outside even what a classic evangelical Christian would think about it.
Yes. The Declaration of Independence does mention God in some way, but it's interesting, the Constitution is a very secular document. It does not mention a God in it. It is meant, now, when it was written, it was really meant for equality between rich white landowners, but over the years, fortunately, it was written in generic enough terms that as society advances and one generation fixes the woes of a previous generation, we're not there yet, but we're getting closer towards equality of what's described in the Constitution.
Yeah, and it's interesting now that we're no longer talking about equality as we're talking about equity. And I think that puts an entirely new spin on equality. And I think, too, when we talk about equality, what is the starting point for equality? And for me, it just goes back to the Word of God, the Declaration, the Constitution.
Yeah. I agree that equity is different than equality.
Yeah.
Equity is, I guess in some respect, is trying to right the wrongs of previous times, to compensate sometimes. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I think, we do want to, right wrongs that have been done. I feel like over the course of our history, we've done that in ways, unfortunately, that resulted in war, but also through those legislative ways that corrected errors that were done in a systemic way.
Okay, yes, and that's where I was going. So the society itself, regardless of what it's based on, either religious tenets or secular documents, the societies themselves over time decide what's equal and what's equitable. So I see it as a project in motion.
It's interesting because I see equality as equal opportunity, whereas I feel like others would see it in terms of equal outcome. And now you're using the same term, but giving it different meanings. That is, we're all equal under the law,
right?
But that does not guarantee we'll all get equal results.
Oh, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think our rights based on the Constitution, in any way guarantee anything,
Right.
other than us being treated equally under the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically preventing government from interfering in our lives.
That was the original premise.
We see how that's changed, haven't we?
And yeah, over the years, the society in general has, through elections, has and points of view change has given the government a little more leeway in deciding if it needs to step in for some benefit of society in general to protect some particular topic.
Yeah. I just hope that, I know we start out with the whole gay pride thing.
You're kind of morphed a little.
I know, it's all right. But you can understand why I enjoy talking with Sam, why I like having him in the group where we talk about spiritual things. And he said it's a diverse group. You have people like myself who are evangelical believers, and then you have people who are nominal believers in God, and then people like Sam who said, no, I don't believe there's enough evidence out there for God. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think there was another group there that is basically there to listen. They're still trying to decide.
Yeah, right.
Where they fall in the spectrum.
Yeah. And you'll have people who will speak up, and then you'll have people there who are very quiet, and they are there to listen, basically. Yeah.
So I suppose you and I are more talkative than some.
But that's good. But what's great about it is that it's civil.
Yes.
The people, like I say, are very different in perspectives, but there's that maintenance of hospitality extended to each one of us.
So much different than what's going on in some of society today.
Ah, exactly. Right. And now you can understand why I like having Sam here on the Sophie Scholl Roundtable, and definitely will have him come back again, because I feel like he's a person who does demonstrate a point of view that we as a culture must understand. Not that we always have to agree, but I think it's important that we hear one another out. And so, Sam, thank you once again
You're
for
welcome.
being here on the Sophie Scholl Roundtable. Join us next time.